Thank you very much for coming. I'm delighted to see a fairly full room here. I am going to talk about the problem of doing QML applications and deciding what should go into QML and what should go into C++. And this is a design and architecture problem that's affected by a lot of different things. So sometimes when you talk to developers, they have a very clear idea of what's right. You probably know these guys. They always go, no, you should do this. This is always the right solution. And pretty much half the people you work with are like that. And funnily enough, their solution is always the perfect one. So what they might say for this is, okay, you have model view controller pattern. You have the view, do that in QML. You have the model and the controller, put that in C++. We're done. Thank you for coming. Any questions? Well, you just paid my ticket here. Thank you. I can leave. Perfect. So, unfortunately, reality has the bad tendency of giving us these gray areas. And those are always the problem. I mean, if you have a simple model that requires fast computing, you're going to put it in C++. All the UI code, you're going to put it in QML. These are not the cases we're going to talk about. It's more about the problem areas. So in this talk, one of the things that I've decided to do for no particular reason is to give you a bad joke on every single slide. It's going to be at the bottom, and it's blue, and it has absolutely no reference or relevance for the slide itself or for the talk. I just happen to like pun jokes, so here's the first of them. And it also tells you a little bit about what we're actually going to do, but read the jokes. That's the important bit. So it's the who, it's the what, and it's the why, and it's the how, pretty much. That I'm going to start out by doing a lot about me, because this is important. And then I'll tell you something about the languages. You probably know a bit about what's good and bad about C++, but let's just stay there. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I'm going to bring that over to what does this mean for the architecture decisions. And then finally, I will show you something about how to integrate C++ and QML. So this is what we're going to do. This is a bit about me. I have been programming for a fair amount of time on Qt. I'm not that old. I may have exaggerated this by about 800 years. Sorry. 1997, that's when I got started with this, when one of my friends showed me KDE. So I've pretty much been doing Qt coding since then. And since 2002, I have been a Qt consultant. So I have written a lot of applications for a lot of different companies. And over the last 5 years, a bunch of these have been QML applications. So I don't have just one reference application that this comes from. I have seen, there are 5 really big QML applications, and then maybe 10 smaller that I've done. So this is what I'm going to talk about here is what I've picked up from all the way through. I am actually a part-time roof builder. I'm building the roof of my house, and I can recommend that. It's very unstressful to do that when you're sitting on a roof and you can't focus on anything but just hammering that and don't fall down. It's impossible to be stressed out when you do that. So, Viking Software, that's my new company. I used to work for ICS up until about half a year ago, and then I left and made my own software company. And it's going fairly well. I have a bunch of customers now, so if any one of you are looking for a job, please take my business cards. My business cards are just up here on the table. If any one of you have some problems that you need me to fix, please take a business card. It's very important. So mostly of what I do is Linux embedded and Windows desktop. So 2 different directions. I don't do a lot of mobile stuff, which is weird when I'm talking about QML, But actually, most of what I've done with QML have been desktop applications. But the issues are the same, no matter what you do. Okay, so first of all, let me just start out by saying something that's not on the slide. Yeah, that's my favorite pun joke, actually. So, QML, I don't know if you know where this comes from, or how it was invented. The idea is so simple. We have been, all of us Qt guys, or Qt guys as it's called nowadays, we have been walking around for years doing all these signal slot connections. And every time we meet, someone says, why isn't this not just automatic? Why can't I just write something and then the signal slots will be connected and automatically updated stuff? Boom, there is all the language bindings of QML. That's where it comes from. That's the basic idea of QML. So Nokia did this. And the way Nokia did software on phones, Nokia was a hardware company, not a software company. Well, that's what they thought, and one of the reasons they're dead now. So when they made a phone, what they did was they wrote the entire software for the phone and just shipped 1 million phones, forgot about the software completely. They didn't do updates. Pfft, who needs those? No. New phone, just throw away all you had, rewrite everything, and ship 1 million of those, hopefully. So that's what QML is built for. And this decision influences a lot of different things. It means that they had to do something that's good for phones. And animations was the thing they couldn't do with the system they already had. So that's obviously good. It had to be fast because phones were still, back then, they were pretty slow. Then, fortunately, they made it easy to do components. This is nice, but it doesn't come from that. QML does have the good thing about it that when you read the code, it's fairly easy to get an idea of what it does. It doesn't mean it's easy to fix problems in, but when you look at a QML piece of code, it is not that easy, not that simple, not that problematic to figure out what it does. But those are the good things about QML. The bad thing, the first thing you have to do when you start writing QML code is that you have to completely forget what you know and start to think in a different way, because QML is not the usual do this, do this, do this, do this that we do in every single other language you ever did, except if you did Prolog. Instead, it is just, here is the state of the world, this is how it is. Another bad thing about QML is the tooling. Yeah, I know that KDAP has something, and yeah, FrogLogic are trying to do squish on this, but the tools on QML, they pretty much suck. And we don't have a decent debugger on this. We don't have tools that really allow us to work with the problem. Then there's JavaScript. I hate JavaScript. And maybe that's just me. I had a customer once that gave me this application and say, fix my problems here. That's what they usually do. And what they did was they just gave me libraries, binary built libraries. That's all the C++ code. That's the real stuff. And they said, here are the QML files, the JavaScript files, fix my problems. And that's like hitting the keyboard like this, because you cannot really get to the meat of the application. But what they had done, they thought they had done something great. They had built the models inside JavaScript. So yeah, they had pretty much re-implemented QAbstract list model in JavaScript. And they paid for it. Not to me, unfortunately, because I said no. So they went away. They were Californian. They couldn't help it. So whatever. That's another one of my favorites. So another thing about QML is that if you do really good modularization, you can split it into teamwork code, certainly. I mean, there's nothing bad about the language is in what it supports on this. But usually what I see is that you get a lot more problems in splitting up in big teams. I'm not talking about 3-man teams, but if you have 20-man teams, then QML is hard to do in a team. And then, of course, the last bad part is that we don't really have a lot. I mean, the components, they promised that, what was it, 3 or 4 years ago, they showed the first version of this, and it still sucks. I mean, come on. We don't have, we can't do file handling in QML. Yeah. So the idea Nokia had, what they were trying to sell to us all these years ago, was we should make pure QML JavaScript applications. That's the goal. That's what we're going to do. And then for some time, we said, yeah, we can't do it yet. Now, we pretty much know, don't ever, ever try and do that. Instead, do what I'm going to tell you today, because my way is the right way. So the really bad part about this, I could have had JavaScript on this one because it deserved it. But yeah, impossible to debug. You cannot single step through through the QML code. You can do it through the JavaScript code, but don't do JavaScript. So it's something where when you do debug this, what you usually end up is just unexchanged console.log x : we're back to printf debugging again. And I don't know, but yeah, you can do gamma ray or something like that, and that's just icing on the pure printf cake. I mean, but the really bad one, that's the no separation of data and visualization. That is the one that for me is the worst decision Nokia ever made while they had control of Qt. And this is where you come back to the story of how they built software. Because they didn't care about making maintainable code. But they just threw it out, made some new. We have to do this. So we actually do want to have a visual designer that works. The one in Creator at the moment, it's unusable. And the reason is this. You cannot do a Creator because it has to look at your code and figure out what is visualization here, what is the stuff I should be working on, I as the visual designer application, which means it has to look at your intention of your code and figure that out. I don't know how many of you have been through university and automaton theory, but that's impossible. And a computer application cannot figure out the intention of your code. It cannot be done. So this can't work with a visual designer, and that sucks. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Lars comes up with, because he said yesterday morning that in December they will have a new visual designer for QML. And I will bet you that it's a one-way thing, that it has its own internal format and it exports something and you can use that, but you cannot fix the code itself or work inside the code, which is the way it should be and the way the widget designer works. Deployment might have only been on the bad side, but it is actually a problem at the moment that we don't know exactly how to really deploy this. I mean, we can, sure we can deploy it. That's not the problem. We can deploy the files themselves, just copy the QML files into the deployment directory on the target machine. That's easy to do. Any installer can do this. That does bring up the problem that your code is right there in the installation, which some of my customers don't really like, and probably some of your bosses probably won't like as well. So we said, okay, let's just put it in resources, and then it's hidden. No, it isn't. It's just take any application viewer that can look at the binary of the code or the executable, and you will see your QML files right there as text files inside the actual binary. So they are there. Then you say, oh, we'll do some encryption and stuff. Yeah, you can do that. You can hide it. I mean, but it's still security by obscurity. We don't know how to securely offer the QML files to the user. The solution might be the compiler, but that's only for those who pay for Qt, unfortunately. So that is a pretty big problem. So the other part, C++. I did talk here, I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, about unit testing. I like unit testing. And in C++, you can unit test. You cannot unit test anything in QML. I mean, what would you do? You can't unit test the QML code. You can unit test JavaScript code. But then you have to use JS unit or something. And you cannot run JS unit on the JavaScript engine in Qt. So you have to run it on a different engine. So what are you really testing? You're not testing the environment that you actually run your JavaScript code in, which means your tests are irrelevant. C++, you can test and do it. Don't skip this. Don't fall to the dark side. Do your unit tests. My way is the right way. Compiler checks is obvious. I mean, this is a problem for any interpreted language, and that's an old discussion. But here we have tools on the good side, because obviously all the tools are great, and we know how to do this, and we know how to split this in terms of teams. And yeah, I'm a C++ programmer, so maybe my view of this is I don't know, biased or limited. I actually happen to really like QML for what it can do, and it may not just have sounded like that, but I really do like working with QML. I just tend to limit it to exactly what I want to do with it. But I'm still a C++ programmer. This is what I'm an expert at. I'm not an expert on QML, even though I've done a lot of the code. And the reason is that I don't think there really are any QML experts. After all these years, I mean 5 years or so, we're still figuring out how to do this. We're discovering the right ways to do stuff with QML. Someone will call these idioms, which are things, small snippets of ways to do things the right way. We're still discovering those in QML. So maybe what I say here, I will have changed the view on in 2 years, but I doubt it. It's a lot of it. There'll be differences, sure, and maybe the toolings will be better and so on. But so I like C++ for a lot of things, but it does have its weaknesses. A lot of this is I go to a customer and I see they have a 20-man team and they're decent programmers, but sometimes I still can't help thinking, give me 4 good programmers and half a year, I will do the entire thing with good architecture and it will work. And the reason is that a lot of companies have to employ junior developers, and C++ is a hard language for junior developers. And those of you who are great C++ programmers might disagree, or you might be senior enough to really agree with this. C++ really needs good developers, and if you haven't read Scott Meyer's Effective C++ books, for example, do it. C++ also have, yes, it will crash the entire applications, and QML usually doesn't do that, usually. Bigger problem is compiler differences. I usually try and do stuff that both work with Visual Studio compiler and with GCC, because if you have 2 compilers, then you catch a lot more problems than if you only do 1. But it is a problem. It used to be a big problem with STL, where all the different compilers came with different approximations to the standard. But nowadays, they've sort of fixed that. Now it's more just the language itself. But it's getting better. So, design consequences. What does all this ramblings about what's good and bad with the languages themselves, what does this need? What does it mean for the design consequences? Well, I come back to the guy that we said, yeah, just model view control, everything QML into the view. That's what this says. I don't want you to ever write JavaScript that you don't have to. I do write JavaScript. I write handlers in signal handlers or slots in QML code, of course, simple ones. But real code, no. You should limit the amount of code in QML files. Make them small. I have one project where one of the QML files is approaching 10,000 lines of code. And yes, it should have been modularized, and there should have been components done, but it's grown. It's not only... I'm not to blame for this, I hope. But it's there now. And the problem with the 10,000 line code, so compare this between QML and C++. If you have a 10,000 line C++ code, that's bad, sure. But it's still split into small methods that you can look at and you can get an overview. It will take you time, but you can get an overview of a 10,000 line C++ code. It sucks that you have to do it, but that's the way it is. It happens. They are out there. But with a QML file, it's impossible for me to give this to a new guy and say, here's a 10,000 line piece of code, please fix this bug. That's not going to work. It cannot be done. It takes so long time to figure out what goes where, what the delegates are, where they go into, how they hook up to the objects up here, because QML is spaghetti code. Because of all the bindings between all the stuff and all the IDs pointing in and outside models and so on. Sometimes you have, when you have models, then inside the items, you have multiple objects for each delegate, and it's impossible to get an overview. You cannot do this. Well, of course you can. It just takes a really long time. So, but that's really, it's one of the things that I will stress a lot. Be careful not to allow your QML files to grow. If they do, start splitting them up as much as you can by making components out of this file. Even if those components are only used by that single file, it still helps for maintainability of the code. Yeah, UI code obviously needs to be QML, but some of it actually is in C++. When you have to write new items in C++, then this line gets blurred. But in theory, at least the description of what goes where, that always goes into QML. So C++ part, that's the MC of the VMC pattern. Business logic, put it in there. Don't ever, ever start doing logic stuff in JavaScript. You can do it, and I cannot tell you that it's completely wrong, because it's possible, and someone might actually think it's a good idea. I happen to say that it's a really bad idea. But yeah, maybe there is some case where I'm wrong. Unit test the entire bottom of your application, because when you do this, then it's much easier to look at the application and you test it, and you look at and you know for almost a fact that your bugs are in your UI, which means you can hunt them in the QML code, as difficult as that may be. But still, you're better off than if you first have to figure out, is it in QML or is it in the C++ layer? Because figuring out where the problem is the first task, and then you have to fix it. And that one is another one of my favorites. Yeah. So let's move on to how you actually do this. So there are, I think, five or four patterns here that I'm going to show you, and a lot of this you can read on the there is a page on the description of how to do this. It's a really long page, and it's hard to read. But the documentation does contain this information, so you can find it. The problem is that it's almost unreadable. So what I've done here is try and break this up into code that you can see in small snippets. So I say this is the purpose of what you're doing, and this is how you do it. That's the idea. And this is about binding the two things together. So now you have done the correct split between this. You have decided your business logic is in C++, and your UI is in QML. Now we need to communicate between the two, so we can show the business logic. That's what I'm doing here. So the first one that you do all the time is in your application you have a singleton somewhere that stores the fundamental model. Especially on phones and tablets, this is what you do always. Try and remember any single application you have on your phone and tell me if this is wrong. That one will show you a list of objects and let you choose one of them to manipulate it. That's what they all do. They show a list of something and let you change it or view it. It's what Facebook does, it's what Twitter does, it's what LinkedIn does. If you have an application that manages your horses in your stable, that's what it does. It lists what horses are there and how many legs they have and so on, and you can change that. But that's what they all do, and you do it this way. You just say, this is my stable. I have a stable that's a list of horses. And that's the fundamental model of pretty much any application on tablets. And a surprisingly big amount of what we do on desktop as well. But on desktop, it's usually more. Then it might be only one out of several screens that does this. But still, it does it as well. So in this case, you somewhere in your main, this is not a real code, of course, you have the model stuff. So what you do is you register this type here. And the trick here is that you cannot create more of them in the QML code. So your new junior guy cannot accidentally create a new stable inside the QML code. He has to only work on the single set of horses you gave him. And then you give it to the viewer, to the root contents, and say, there is now an object called MC, and this is the class that has it, or the object, the instance of this list. The model class is an abstract list model, and I'll come back to later how you communicate what's inside the list itself. I'll show that in later slides. This is only about giving the actual object to QML. So the QML is so simple, it's boring. So inside the list view, where you want to show the list of horses, you just say the model is your MC object, and it just appears. And you can call methods on it, you can connect to signals on the MC stuff, wherever. So this is simple. So more fun is when you have your own QObject and you want to export this to QML. This is basically something that we do all the time. So the idea is you have this is, in this case, this is a backend object. So you have one object this is the star pattern where everything is controlled by a single object. We can discuss whether that's a good design decision or not, but it's usable. So this backend object has a reference to all the other objects in the application. In here, you have a lot of properties, and one of them is our model class before. So instead of just giving the singleton directly, we now just have a property on the backend. We have another property here that is active. We have some enums. Yeah. This one means you can call this function from QML. And what you do is you just register the type of this backend. So in QML, you can say backend start, and you can access all of these. I don't know about you, but QProperties are something that I've seen on all over the Qt code, and they're nice to have in Designer, but you don't really bother making Designer plugins anyway, so you usually don't write them. But when you do QML code, then they start becoming really handy, because this exports the properties to QML. This is what it uses to do the bindings. So inside the QML code, we have a place here, we instantiate a backend. We do some property stuff on the model. These are now contacts, they're not horses. Might be the same. This is a slot on a signal from this. So again, I mean, yeah, it looks so simple. So maybe this is trivial, but you need to know this stuff, because this is how you actually do it. So let's move on. I told you I'd get back to the model itself, the list model. And this is what you do when you have the list of, this is a contact list. So we have a list of people that we want to show in our application, and one of the things a contact usually have is a name. So what we do in the C++ is that we say we now a new role. Roles are the stuff we return in data. I hope you're familiar with these, abstract item model classes. If not, become familiar with them. They're amazing, and they have been forever, but they're hard to get into. If you haven't worked with them before, you have some work cut out for you, but trust me, it is worth it. When you have a good model, it's just something that works, and it's a nice fuzzy feeling that you just have this, and you know this is great, and you can visualize it in anything pretty much. And so the idea here is that you, in the data, you can ask for different stuff with the role. The role can be a font role, it can be edit role, which returns the string you're editing, or the integer, or stuff like that. So the data gets what do I want and which one of them. That's what it does. What you do with this one is add stuff that you can ask for in the list view. That's what I do here. So here there's only name, but in real application, it's not uncommon to have 20 different extra roles that you add on the application model. So in the QML code, we have the list view. Now we want to show the contact list in here. And again, we just have the model, set the model on it. Now we do a delegate. We want to draw something, and we probably do some gradients and stuff like that and make it nice. And inside this one, we have a magic number here that's just starts from 0, goes up to the number of entries in the model. So this one's automatically set, and here's the new role I did, which is the name of the contact. So usually here you would have more stuff. You would have the phone number and stuff like that, put in different fonts and stuff like that. But it's the same idea for all of them. So no need to have more than this. Okay, so the other way around. Now you have QML code, and you want to do something in C++ that accesses this stuff. And that's a bit more fun. So, and a bit more hairy code, actually. So here we have a bomb, and we have a countdown. This is probably somewhere you have a timer or something. When it changes, you check, is it 0? If it does, bad. So we have a function on this one, fix world. That was the one we declared earlier. That's nice to have. I wish we had more of those. So this is the C++ code that does this stuff. And that might look hairy, and it is. So the first part is we have a view, put the QML file in. This is a resource file, nicely obfuscated. And we connect to the signal on this boom thing. And that's all there is to it. It's just a signal slot connection as usual, and it just works. So connecting to signals in the QML code, let me just go back here. This one, that's surprisingly easy. and it just works. Sometimes you have to be careful about the types you do, because it's not always easy to make the types work between QML and C++. Yes?
Do you really want to do a Q declarative view there instead of a Q quick view?
So the question was, do I really want to do a Q declarative view instead of a Q quick view? No, I don't. This should be a Q quick view up in Qt 5 code. Yeah, the example code I found from the customer application, this is real customer code. I'm actually under NDA. I shouldn't even show you this. So, but that's a thing I copied over from 4 to 5, and the easy way is to just do Qt quick 1 in Qt 5. So that's the reason this is a declarative view. But yeah. Use Q quick view instead. So the other one. Now the bomb has gone off, and we have asked it to go into the slot here. And inside the slot, what we do is we call this function on the QML object, and you can add more arguments to this one. You can get the return value and so on, and it's a surprisingly bad syntax to do that, but that's easy to find. The problem that you really need to know is that this exists, the invoke method. This is not a new thing, the invoke method. You have been able to do this on C++, the QObjects, forever. This is dynamic method invocation, which is something C++ doesn't have, but Qt does through the QObjects. Yeah?
Maybe I'm wrong, but doesn't the documentation say you should rather use the QInvoke method macro something and pass QArgs?
So the question is, doesn't the documentation say you should use the QInvoke method with QArgs? Yes, I don't have any QArgs on this one, so I don't. But there are macros that put the bad syntax together in something that's reasonable, because it's not that you cannot understand the syntax. It's just that who would ever want to? So just use the macros if it's anything more involved than just calling a function. For a simple function call, this is fine. So that's actually all I had for this one. I hope you have a bunch of questions for me. Yes?
Could you go back to the previous slide, please?
I could do that.
What do you think about the object not in the root, but inside the tree?
What do you do if you need to connect to an object in the tree? So you have a QML file, you have items there, and somewhere deep in the tree, there is the object you want to connect to. You have several different options for this. First of all, in the QML code, you can call back into C++. You can call one of the QInvocable and give it the object that you want to connect to. This is one possibility. When you do the call, you can just reference it by ID, and you get a Q variant over on the C++ side. You can cast that to a Q object and do your connect. You can only do that with the old Qt 4 method of doing signal slots, because obviously you cannot do something that's code or checked by the compiler for this one. But that's one of the cases where the old connection is still very usable. Another thing you can do is in QML, you can give it an object name, which works exactly the same as object names on any other Q object. So you can say object name colon, and then, object name colon, and then the name of the object. And you can call find child on the root context, and you will find your object.
There's a restriction for this method, because if you have dynamically created QML objects, there's another context, and you can't spread this context because it's
yes.
owned by the other entity.
So this is what was just said. If you have dynamically created objects, you cannot do this, because if that's where you have, if you have a loader, for example, this is in a different context. So you cannot find the object. In that case, you have no other way of doing it than doing the callback. It was, and there is another case where this is a problem as well, and that is in models. When you do list views, for example, in the delegate, you have one per item you're showing. So you cannot just access stuff by ID, because there are more with the same ID. And then again, you have to figure out which one is the one. That usually requires, am I the current index? If so, this is the object you should connect to at the moment. Yeah?
A moment. Concerning this context is it possible to grab context from the Java script engine?
Is it possible to ask the JavaScript engine to give you the context?
Right.
Possibly. Does anyone know? I don't.
It was mentioned in one of the lightning talks yesterday that that is in fact possible.
Yeah, I was about to say that you can get the context. I would be worried about doing that though, because then you're starting to get into something that's outside of the documented API of Qt, which means you're entering the belly of the beast here. Yeah. So you might hit something that changes with the next patch level version of Qt, and that you don't want to do.
But it will try to fix the problem.
Yes, you can fix this problem that way, but I would still say if you do hit the problem, just do the callback. Do the Q invocable, give the object to the C++ that you want to connect to. It's by far the easiest. You know it works.
It's much more pleasant to read as well.
Yes, it's much more pleasant to read. You really don't want to get into the belly of the JavaScript engine. That's almost as horrible as the language itself. I have single-stepped through JavaScript engine code. Oh, that was a bad day. Yes?
Yes, I have an idea. We have an application, maybe two different applications on two different devices. They are communicating via IP, okay, and we are using JSON RPC. So, and this part is written in C++, and now what I have is JSON objects, JSON arrays, and all of these things, and I would like to kick out the rest of C++ and use them directly in, let's say, any kind of QML model and represent it in views. But I could not figure out how to do this, or if this is even possible.
I do not think it's possible without a C++ layer, because we don't have the equivalent of the XML list model item for QML or for JSON yet, I think. Is that a comment on this? Yeah. Okay.
There is a third-party library which does it.
Sure.
I use it.
Sure. You get third-party libraries that do a lot, but but if you're gonna deploy a third-party library, you might as well just have your own C++ layer. So the reason you want to get rid of C++ layer is to only give a QML-only application. Yeah. So
it's a GS library. You would hate it.
Oh. I hate it. Yes, you are very correct. But other than that, I don't think it's possible. It's possible if you chose to have your application communicating through XML, because then you have the XML list model instead. But I don't think there is such a thing for JSON yet. Okay. It might be that it's around the corner, because everyone seems to think that XML is just so 90s and JSON is what we do now. So yeah, it probably is around the corner. Thank you. Next one. Yes, right here.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, you mentioned that you cannot debug QML and only JavaScript. And but I have the question: have you tried the commercial version? And is the QML debugger? What do you think of it? If you have,
I haven't tried it.
Okay.
But it still doesn't change the fundamental problem that you don't have anything to single step through. That's what a debugger does. It does two things. It shows you the current state, and it lets you stop an application and step through the next part of it. That's what a debugger does. It can show the current state of a QML application. That's easy. Gamma Ray can do that. Single step is impossible because it doesn't exist. The whole concept doesn't exist in QML language because there is no such thing as what happens one after the other. Once you start doing that, you're in JavaScript land.
Okay. Thank you.
Next question. Come on, hit me. Yes.
I have only one consideration about the decision of using models. The question is this one. Sometimes you have one QObject that models some kind of information, like a contact. And then you write your model as an abstract list model, okay, of contacts. However, you have to write the boring stuff of the abstract model. So you have to write the roles, the role names, and the code is always the same. So in my own software, I use a different approach, and I ask you if it's a good one or a bad one. So I use... Okay. No, okay. Basically, the abstract model, okay, abstract list model is just a list of QObjects pointers. So in QObjects pointers are contacts. In this way, I expose only one role that's called object, one role. So in the QML, I can use object dot the name of the property of the contact. Suppose that I have QObject contact. That's two property, name and surname. Okay, so in the list model, I have object point dot name. In this way, I can both use one abstract model, so that is correct for any kind of QObject, and then at the same time, I can both inject inside the context a single contact, so and also use it as in the abstract model.
Well, there's nothing wrong about doing that. There are some potential issues. There are some things that you need to consider when doing this. For example, when you have QObjects, you need to make sure that people do not delete these. Otherwise, you have to have list of QPointer of QObjects, because people tend to call delete later on these QObjects all over the place, and suddenly your application goes boom, and you don't have a fixed world to do anything about that. But that's just a small restriction on what you can do yourself. There's nothing wrong about the idea of doing the introspection of QObject for this. What I will say is that it makes it fairly hard to unit test your application, to unit test your model, that makes sure that this gives the right information to the QML layer. You can probably do it, but then you would have to use the QObject introspection in the unit test. Yeah, it's possible. Yeah. I don't see the reason why you shouldn't do this, other than that there is something that tells me this is just a slightly bad idea, but I cannot pinpoint what it is. And this is sometimes the problem when you have 17 years of experience with Qt, that you do this, and then it takes some time, and then Friday morning I will wake up and say, that's the reason. So there are warning signs going off here. It's not big warning. It's not. It's bleep, bleep, bleep. So I cannot just give you an answer on why this is good or bad, but you can get away with it. That's for sure.
There is the detail. It depends a little bit on whether you have data that's getting updated in those QObjects, because then you need to track the properties changing. But if it's just static data that you've put into a model which doesn't change at runtime,
that you can code your way outside of that, because you can just go through in the model, you look at all the properties, and you connect the update data from the signal that the property was changed.
Oh yeah.
So you can actually do this as well, but maybe one of the reasons that I'm slightly hesitant to just say yeah, sure, go, is that this sounds like a really hard model to get right, and to get right in a way where you never have to worry about it being wrong. And that's a guarantee that I cannot give you, that you can do this. My gut feeling says it's possible, but that I wouldn't do it myself.
Here, I've got a comment to that. I'm not sure in which talk it was yesterday, but there was somebody who mentioned that he also does this with QObjects in the model, and he said the problem that you have to be aware of the object ownership, because as soon as you pass the models into the QML, they get owned by the JavaScript engine, and I'm not sure exactly what his workaround was, but there.
Yeah, but this is items inside the model, and the JavaScript engine does not own that. You still have the ownership problem of who owns the objects inside the list, but that's just a decision on your part. The items themselves do get given to the JavaScript engine, but only as a reference, so it does not own these. It will not delete the objects for you.
Excuse me, I just have some comments. In fact, there is some alternatives. One can use a QQML list property, or QQML property list, I don't remember the name, which is kind of wrapper on a QList or something else, QMaps, something else. And you can use this as a model. So you don't need to use QAbstract list model if you just want to have all the property of your QObjects. You just can have like a QList of QObject in C++, and you can wrap it in a QQML list property, which is exposed to QML. And it just exposes all the property of the Q property of your object. And you also get the updated, and it's also read-only, or you can write it too. You can insert content from QML side and read it. Or if you want like a read-only list, you can use directly a Q list of objects as a Q property, and you can use this as a model source.
Yes.
So there is different alternatives to using that QAbstract model.
That is true. But if you have a pure list of objects, then you're just using simple QML stuff. Then you're not taking advantage of the good things that a model can give you. So yes, that's true.
Okay. One more comment. I think the docs are actually silent on whether the ownership is passed to the runtime and to the QML garbage collection when you actually give your QObject pointer through a model role, or specifically through the data method on QAbstract item, or speaking shortly, on the QModel. That's one thing. Essentially, I think that's undocumented. The docs only say that you can set parent, and then it will be C++ owned. You can explicitly call set object ownership, and then you either pass C++ ownership or JavaScript ownership, and it says nothing on the use case in question. That's one comment. And secondly, I think the interesting thing here is that QObjects are not value types here, right? And that's the problem, because with something as simple as it's usually done, with something like SQ variant map, right? You can always be sure that it will be there, sitting as a context property for your delegate while the delegate is alive. And as soon as the delegate is gone, you're okay, nothing to worry about. But not the same with an object reference. So
Yeah,
one solution could
the
be
ownership problem again.
Yeah. So and one solution could actually be to use covariant map. It could probably be syntactically just the same. You use a covariant map and you put it as a context property.
But then you're even further down the road of automating something that you probably would be better off writing in the first place. So I think we should leave this case and go to someone have a different question. Yes, new question. Come. Yes. Yeah. Just stop us. They're picking my range. That's fine.
Okay, another hopefully interesting aspect. Let's say I have a config file in XML from the 90s, okay? Now, okay, this config file, maybe it's a bit bigger, so I have items, sub-items, and sub-sub-items. So, and now there's this XML, QXML model, but sometimes I really don't like to write all this XQuery and XParse, and maybe it's a bit too much. What I'm now looking for is a way to transform this XML directly into some kind of an QJSON, QML object where I can walk through just putting dots. Maybe I got item 1, then how many items, sub-items are there? Okay, 5. Then which kind of item is it? Okay, so now I have an idea, and then I can build my own model, or maybe the model itself is automatically generated, so I can represent it in a view. Yeah, because I have views that fits the models, and so it builds up from itself like a tree view or something.
Yeah, tree views, QML. Have you seen that done?
Yeah, that's the problem. So, that's what I'm looking for.
Okay, so I've done exactly this case before, actually, for a customer 4 years ago. What I did was to do this by dynamically creating the QML objects on the C++ side and giving those to the object. And I can tell you, there be dragons here. It's a lot better now. I did that in the 4.7 days, and I was hitting bugs by the day in this area. It's difficult, and it's not something that's done usually, which means it's not tested a lot. It's one of the worst areas of Qt. I can guarantee you that. So, but it's possible. And usually the best way to do it is to get the QML item that you want as the parent, and then you create a new one from a text file. You can either have the file describing the QML item on disk, or you can just make it as a QString, but you create the object from a string. Don't try and instantiate QML items in any other way. That will fail. It's possible, yes. In theory, it should work. In practice, bugs. So if you do that and then give these objects to the QML interpreter that way, it actually does work. So that's the way you would do it. You write something that goes through your XML file. When you hit a node, you create a new item, and when you go into that, that way, you're on the other side. Then when you go into the XML file, then you make that item the parent of all the children, and you can do that recursively. So it's not hard code. It's not difficult to understand. You still need C++ to do it.
According to tree view in QML, I had a discussion yesterday with a talker, and I heard that it would be possible to get a tree view with Qt 5.4.1.
Possibly.
So maybe this.
It's one of the things that we say all the time. If you have a UI that needs a table or a tree view, you need widgets.
It's a part of the Qt controls bit, so it's basically widgets.
Qt control still sucks, so I don't use those.
They're not. They're one of those. They're not quite there yet. Bits.
Yes, they're not quite there yet. The problem is that I actually only write production code, so I need things to be bug-free, complete, and so on. All those nice things that you want to have, and we're used to have in every single part of Qt, except components.